Welcome, creepy creatures, to another Midnight Graveyard.
Welcome.
We just finished watching a new Hulu movie, Mr. Crockett, and we've got a few things to say. So grab some blood of your local lover or whoever happens to be nearby and join us for an epic adventure. Anything you wanted to start off with on Mr. Crockett?
I thought it was okay. I thought kind of a generic horror. Some interesting concepts, but I feel like they were maybe not explored to the degree that I would have been satisfied with. So it sort of left me wanting and feeling like unfulfilled potential, I think, is kind of how I would frame my perspective of it. What did you think?
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those movies I would give it like a 2 skulls out of 5 skulls, but even a 3 if you're in the mood for something that's just
Different, new.
Yeah, distracting, new, fun, a little playful, and not so serious. I think it can be enjoyable. I will say this movie had me laughing at some scenes that were meant to be horror scenes, but were done in that way that you cannot help but crack up at the ridiculousness of the gore.
There was some obvious gore, not the most realistic that I've seen, so that added a bit of comedic element to the, right?
Yeah, and go ahead.
Some of the writing, right? Some of those, just those situations that, like, some of the, like, the ridiculousness of some of it, absolutely provided some comedic value.
Yes, I will say the writing's better than some of the other ones that we saw that were making us laugh from the actual dialogue. I say less of the dialogue and more of the scenes in this one that had me laughing out loud. But it also has to deal with, a childhood scenario, so childhood puppets and things. It gave me very much like that Mr. Rogers vibe.
I felt like there were direct references to Rogers as well.
Yes, so that over the top, joyful for children attitude, but in a very creepy fashion, which was fun to see. So that's why I'd say I could see this having 3 skulls, because it was really fun to see some of the elements of childhood shows being done in a very creepy way. Like I mentioned, I loved the clock in this because it was so creepy and just ridiculous, but still like this animated clock that you would typically see in like a kids show kind of thing.
Yeah, it did a very good job of expounding on like that sort of vague notion of like creepiness or spookiness that comes with some of that like 90s children's programming. I think they referenced 93 maybe. But that you have adults behaving in a way that's like most agreeable to children or to get their attention, right? But like even as an older kid, you start to sort of get that idea of like, this is sort of weird, kind of creepy, because like they're an adult and I never see them behave like a real adult, right? It's always like Mr. Rogers is super polite and minding his manners and generally very positive and happy, and that's like, I don't know, that's not real life. So there's like an element of like creepiness there once you start to get old enough to become aware of the world around you. And I feel like this Mr. Crockett movie did a good job of sort of blowing that up to like a ridiculous degree, right? Obviously, because it's murder and gore and horror, but it rooted in something real that a lot of people can associate with.
Yes, and I felt like it set up this conversation that is typically done with divorced families where, oh, you love dad more because he doesn't give you a bedtime and lets you play on your tablet all night, and you go out to eat and you're only there, every other weekend, so you get ice cream, and so it's always a treat. It's always fun. There's no boundaries or limits. And so that conversation that you hear a lot, typically it's set up in that dynamic. I felt like they had a play on this with the childhood sitcom. The kids love these old, these childhood TV shows because they're unrealistic and they're not doing the real hard work of parenting by setting boundaries and limits and putting kids to bed and telling them no. It's all, let's do this in a sing-song fun way, and I'm not going to make you eat your vegetables. Here's some cotton candy instead, because that's makes the kid happier and is better, but it's not better, right? Like, that's not better for a child. So I thought that they took that to this like next level of just dark and creepy, and what that would be if that world was a true reality of how it could lure children very easily into this space by giving them this freedom and then using them and manipulating them to create a world where they are getting the, adult, the TV lead is getting what they want in this situation.
Right.
So I liked that. I thought that was a good, strong connection. I also thought it touched on a lot of like trauma, childhood trauma, unresolved childhood trauma in the adults.
Yeah, yeah, I could see more like vague gesturing towards that, right, than anything obvious or direct. But I think I know what you mean with some of that, because, so much of that trope, hurt people, or whatever, right? You can kind of see some parallels around the adults who are behaving badly towards children and the children's bad behavior. People aren't that different.
Absolutely. So this whole idea that, an abused child turns into a bully as a middle schooler, a teenager, which we, statistically is accurate to some degree, and then turns into an adult that now enjoys abusing children or taking children for their own comfort. So that was kind of played upon as well, which I thought was well done. I liked that. I liked that they gave that a little bit of a backstory and didn't just leave it as maybe a demonic thing. Like, they gave it a little bit more substance there.
Yeah, a little bit grounded in reality, right?
I thought that one of the things that was well done and not often mentioned is this obsession with like childhood innocence, and trying to preserve that, even though the world that children live in is not innocent. And often children are regularly exposed to hard things, and it is a parents' and families' responsibility to make that as easily
navigable,
as possible, but not to avoid it, dismiss it, negate it in any way. And so often we see good parenting is when you sugarcoat everything and you've got these overly positive everything is just to the extreme positive, rather than I'm angry too, or I shouldn't have broken that either, because that's not what we do when we're angry. And so you could see that dichotomy of that. Where I see the wheels are turning.
No, I'm just trying to follow.
Your
train of thought. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I thought you were going to add something by the way that you were moving, because you do get one family and one parent that we follow and see that is, for the most part, a good parent, but makes mistakes and sets boundaries and limitations and isn't necessarily following the advice of her elders to beat their kid.
Right. There's definitely commentary on like childhood and parenting and development, right? Like we were saying with some of the like hurt people, right? I think speaks to some development stuff in general, because that's right, you develop into a person that thinks abuse is okay, or copes with certain situations with that bad behavior. It's, so I was interested in some of that. I think it sort of suffered from trying too hard to be a horror. Like some of these psychological concepts I think are scary enough that we could have done with more of that and less of the intestines on the floor. And maybe that's just my own personal preference for media or storytelling. But for me, that's like the specter of what's behind someone's eyes or in their head or in your past, or if it's in you even, right? Like that's the scariest stuff to me. And I feel like they had like a feast of that we only got a small portion of. And so I felt a little bit like teased or something, because I'm not satisfied with the like gore for the sake of being gross. Like it doesn't really gross me out all that much, and I don't find it all that scary. It's just a body, just the inside of a body. It's just medicine, in a different setting. It's just surgery. It's, so I don't, this doesn't get me the way that some of the psychological stuff does.
I mean, it makes me squirm and it's gross and I always look away. I don't typically like gore like that, but I know it has a place in horror, like as a whole. Like it's, and not just, tastefully to my liking. There are so many people that are into that. So I feel like they chose to do that because they wanted to draw in that audience, and that tends to be kind of popular, actually.
There was a bit of pandering, I think,
yeah,
with it.
And it's not for me. That's not my thing, but right. I feel like that's a piece of it.
Well, do you also feel like that there could have been more exploration of some of those like psychological horrors that they like sort of missed out on because they were doing that other stuff?
Yeah, and I also think that they, because they set themselves up for a sequel that we had mentioned, they could have actually held off on even some of the backstory of the main character in a way to open it up for a better sequel.
Yeah.
I feel like we got a lot of tied information, and then they kind of threw out this weird, like, demonic thing, too, that was not really necessary.
It didn't make a ton of sense.
Like, I would have been okay without it, actually. Even though we didn't get an explanation on, like, the powers and abilities, I still could have been fine without an explanation there. But it felt like they just wanted to throw a lot, kind of like Candyman a bit, too, where you get this, like, sad freaking story that you're like, yeah, I'd be evil. But then they layered on, like, these extra things that you're like, all right, like... So, yeah, not bad.
I was disappointed with the ending. I felt like they could have done more for the story and plot, and instead chose to set up, like, a obvious, in my opinion, like, sequel.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 2 out of 5 skulls for me. It was okay. Definitely not a bad movie, and if you're looking for a new one this spooky season... and you don't mind the gore because there are some pretty gory scenes. Mm-hmm. It's worth a watch. Not
too many gory scenes, so I feel like you could make do. I will say with the, hurt people, mm-hmm. like that whole concept, one of the things that struck me was at the end, children are being placed into foster homes, and I thought, okay, so... I think we all know foster homes are not the best places for children overall in general. Like they tend to...
It's rife for abuse and manipulation.
And I just thought, okay, so that's where we're placing... Like, I wish the movie had just, even if it was like some BS, just put all these kids in homes that we could have pretended were like safe and good. Knowing and hearing, they're being put in these foster homes. I'm like, oh, great. So when they... struggle and are in trouble, they're going to call out to this other Looney Tunes again, because he said he's always watching and he waits for children to call out in need, and they are most likely going to be children in need.
Right, but we already discussed how they were setting up for a sequel, so of course, that they're working against themselves if they put them into like happy homes, sort of.
I mean, I kind of had thought that the sequel would just be with like a new set of kids. I wasn't even thinking it would be the same.
Yeah, no, that's very likely, and you're right that they could still definitely do that, but it isn't. Right, like when I had mentioned that I was disappointed with the ending, and then I felt like they could have done more for the plot and the story, but instead chose to set themselves up for a sequel. I also feel like them doing more for the plot or story, that would have been dark stuff. It would not have been a happy ending. It wouldn't have been, you know what I mean? It would have been more scary and horrific. So it sort of depends on what you're looking for, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, but I can totally understand why they set that up the way that they did, because I think that more speaks to them trying for a sequel than it does the storytelling or the like earlier film itself even, you know.
Yeah, instead of even just playing on the themes that they kind of wove throughout this whole thing. Yeah, I do think that it was like enjoyable though, you know, and I like the whole idea of using this like VHS concept, you know, like we had mentioned, the technology piece that lends itself to being creepy because it's not as common, and there's many groups of people that don't really understand that equipment today and maybe stumble upon it and get those fuzzy scenes, and so there's a lot to play with there. So I liked that, and I liked the Mr. Rogers reference, and just embedding children in this film I thought was it was like enjoyable, and I would recommend a watch, but I think it also depends on the type of horror viewer that you are. There's more gore, less scare, definitely not any jump scares.
No, not really.
Not much suspense, right?
Not really. Not much of that.
Just trying to like comprehend the storyline, and I'd say within the first 5 minutes we were like, oh my gosh, the villain is our hero, and then it kind of shifted a bit too. So that was pleasurable and fun.
No, there was a lot of interesting like commentary on that, and that's a big reason why I was disappointed with the way they chose to wrap it up, because I thought they could have saved it and made it a 4 out of 5. I think with a different ending, I believe it. I would have left the movie feeling much more positively about it, and so I was disappointed with that. But
I think that makes sense.
I think that's
all you have to say on Mr. Crockett?
Yeah, I think that's about all I have. What's your final score, you think?
I think my final score is a 2.
Okay.
But I do want to just elaborate that my scores don't mean don't watch it, because I rate things. I enjoy watching really bad horror movies in particular. So I rated a 2, and I encourage you to go view it for yourself and leave some feedback on what you gained from it.
Yeah, no, I can agree with all of that. I think a 2, a 1.5, a 2 is reasonable, but also that it's highly dependent on what it is you're seeking in that moment, even, right, for a movie. If you're looking for a playful one or a fun one or one that isn't too dark or doesn't have junk, it's perfect for all that, right? So there's pluses and negatives to everything. This one, just for my own personal taste, I think mainly it's on the lower end than the higher end. But like you said, that's not an indictment of the work. That's just an opinion. Yeah. I would say check it out if you're looking for maybe a lighter one that's still in the horror genre.
Yeah. If there were a sequel, I would definitely watch it, and I would encourage you to watch it with others, because I think you could enjoy it, and I hope you laugh and you cheer for the villain and then change your opinion and go through all the emotions.
One of my favorite things about media is inspiring conversation. So I think this is a really good one for that. Excuse me, because of some of the concepts that like are sort of brought up and never really directly addressed or resolved. So it sort of leaves you wanting to talk about certain things that you might not normally want to talk about. So that's a great reason to watch the film, actually.
Absolutely. So
thanks for tuning in.
Check out Mr. Crockett on Hulu and let us know what you think.
Till next time.
Till next time, creepy creatures.